I wasn't the kind of woman who dove headfirst into dating apps. For years I told myself they were shallow, a place where people lied about their height, posted photos from 5 years ago, and swiped away real conversations like candy wrappers. I liked control, order, predictability. I was 31, a teacher's assistant at an elementary school in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the most exciting part of my week was my Thursday night yoga class. My friends told me I needed to put myself out there. My mom worried I'd end up alone with too many cats. So one evening, after a glass of cheap Pinot Grigio and way too much scrolling through Instagram couples on vacation, I gave in. I downloaded Bright Match, one of those apps that promised authenticity, not hookups. I filled out my profile with care, 2 pictures where I wasn't overposing, a quick line about being a bookworm, and a safe list of interests, hiking, coffee shops, and 90s music. I wasn't expecting much. A few awkward conversations, maybe a polite dinner or two. That was until I matched with Ethan. His profile picture was simple, him in a navy sweater, leaning against a stack of books. He wore glasses, had an easy smile, and described himself as a high school English teacher who still thinks about joining a garage band. He wasn't movie star handsome, but something about him seemed approachable. Safe. The kind of man you could bring home to your mom without hesitation. Our first conversation hooked me. He asked questions, not the surface level, wide or you up. Nonsense, but real ones. What was my favorite novel? Did I think cinnamon rolls counted as breakfast or dessert? Had I ever gone on a spontaneous road trip? He was funny without trying too hard, attentive without being pushy. For a week, we texted late into the night. He sent me photos of his dog, a golden retriever named Max. I shared stories about the kids in my classroom and how they mispronounced spaghetti in hilarious ways. He made me laugh. I caught myself checking my phone every few minutes, hungry for the little chime that meant he'd replied. By Friday, he asked me out for coffee. I hesitated, remembering the rules I promised myself. Always meet in public, always tell someone where I was going, and always drive myself. Still, I said yes. We chose Bean Brew, a cozy coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, Ethan was already there, leaning against the counter, waving when he saw me. He looked just like his pictures, maybe even better in person. We talked for 2 hours straight. He told me about teaching To Kill a Mockingbird to high schoolers who couldn't stop laughing at the name Scout. I told him about my failed attempt to make homemade sushi. It was easy, normal. When it was time to leave, he insisted on walking me to my car. I didn't think much of it. It was late, and the streets were quiet. But when I slid my keys into the lock, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, close. My heart jumped. But Ethan was still standing 10 feet away, phone to his ear, smiling as if nothing was wrong. "Everything okay?" he asked, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just thought I heard something." I drove home that night replaying the sound of those footsteps in my head, telling myself it was nothing. Just nerves. Just the echo of my own shoes on the pavement. I wanted to believe that. The following week was a blur of lesson plans, grocery runs, and long evenings grading homework. Ethan kept texting me, little check-ins that felt sweet at first. "Good morning, hope your day goes well." Or, "Did you ever finish that book?" I liked the attention. It had been a long time since anyone cared enough to ask. But then I started noticing things. It began with the Garberry black SUV. The first time it was parked across the street from my apartment complex. Lights off, engine running. I brushed it off as coincidence. By the third night in a row, it wasn't coincidence anymore. The same SUV, the same spot. I told myself not to panic. Maybe it belonged to a neighbor. Maybe someone liked to sit in their car and listen to the radio. Still, my gut tightened. Then came the notes. The first one was tucked under my windshield wiper. "Pretty smile today." I stared at it in the dim parking lot light, my stomach sinking. Who had seen me? When? The second note arrived 2 nights later. I know when you're alone. I froze on the sidewalk, note trembling in my hand, every nerve in my body screaming. This wasn't a sweet gesture. This wasn't harmless. This was someone watching me, someone who knew my routines, my moments of vulnerability. That night, I texted Ethan. Hey, weird question. You haven't been around my place, have you? He replied almost instantly. Why do you ask? I stared at the screen, debating whether to say more. Finally, I typed, There's been this SUV outside my building and some notes. A pause. Then, don't worry, that was me. I just wanted to make sure you got home safe. My blood ran cold. You followed me? I typed, fingers shaking. Yeah, but it's not what you think. I was just making sure you weren't in danger. I care about you, Samantha. Isn't that what women want? A guy who looks out for them? I didn't reply. I couldn't. My chest felt like it was caving in. When my phone buzzed again, his words made my skin crawl. Don't be mad, I just see you, the real you. I barely slept that night. Every sound outside my window felt amplified, every shadow a threat. And when I glanced out at 2 a.m., the SUV was still there, waiting. By Wednesday, the notes multiplied. One on my windshield, another slipped under my doormat, each one more unsettling than the last. You shouldn't leave your window open. Red looks good on you. I told myself to confront him. Maybe he didn't realize how terrifying this was. Maybe he thought it was romantic. I texted, Ethan, this has to stop. It's crossing a line. He called me within seconds. I almost didn't answer, but my hand betrayed me. Sam, his voice was calm, too calm. Why are you making this a big deal? I'm just protecting you. Don't you see how vulnerable you are living alone? Following me home, watching me. That's not protection, it's stalking. He chuckled, low and dismissive. Stalking is what creeps do in the movies. This is different. This is love. I'd never hurt you. I wanted to scream, but my throat tightened. If you don't stop, I'll call the police. Silence on the other end. Then slowly. The police won't do anything. I haven't threatened you. I haven't touched you. Think about it, Sam. You'd just look paranoid. Click. He hung up. That night, I pushed a chair against my front door and clutched a kitchen knife in bed. Every creak of the building made me flinch. At 3 a.m., I heard it, fingers brushing against my doorknob. When I checked through the peephole, the hallway was empty, but taped to the door was another note. We belong together. By Friday, I was unraveling. I told my coworker Jenna about Ethan, voice shaking as I explained the notes and SUV. She stared at me, horrified. You need to go to the police, today. I was embarrassed. Part of me still clung to the idea that maybe I'd overreacted, maybe I'd misunderstood. But Jenna drove me to the precinct herself. The officer at the desk listened patiently, but frowned. Has he threatened physical harm? Not directly, I admitted. But he's been following me, leaving notes, trying to get into my building. The officer sighed, scribbling on a form. We'll file a report. If he escalates, call us right away. In the meantime, change your locks, get a security camera if you can. It wasn't enough. It felt like a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. That night, I heard banging on my front door. Hard, deliberate. My heart raced as I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. Through the door, his voice echoed, calm but insistent. Sam, open up. Stop pretending you don't feel it too. Police are on their way, I shouted. The banging stopped. Silence. By the time the cruiser arrived, the hallway was empty. But the officers found fresh scratches near the lock, evidence he'd tried to force his way in. Ethan vanished after that night. The police increased patrols around my block, and I stayed with Jenna for a week. Every time I walked to my car, I scanned the lot for that black SUV. It never came back. But the fear stayed. The feeling of eyes on me lingered, long after he disappeared. A month later, I got an email from an unrecognizable address. No subject line, just one sentence. You can't ignore me forever. I deleted it, forwarded it to the detective, and shut my laptop. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the kind of story with clean endings. Men like Ethan didn't just give up. They waited. They circled. And so, I learned to live with my guard higher than ever. With new locks, cameras, and instincts sharpened by survival. Because sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones in horror movies. They're the ones who know your favorite book, your favorite color, your laugh. The ones who seem perfect until you say no. I used to believe love was simple. That warm, fluttering feeling you got when someone smiled at you across a crowded room. The late-night texts that made your heart race. The small gestures that made everything feel right. I thought I had it all figured out. Or at least I thought I knew the difference between charm and danger. That illusion shattered the night I met Eric. It started at a downtown art gallery. I was browsing a collection of abstract paintings, trying to pretend I knew what expressionism meant when I bumped into him. Literally bumped. He spilled a sip of red wine on my coat. I am so sorry, he said. And that voice, it wasn't just polite. It was warm, measured, somehow commanding without being overbearing. Here, let me help you with that. He whipped out a napkin and dabbed the stain with careful precision. I smiled awkwardly, muttering it was fine, but he shook his head. No, it's not fine, he insisted. Let me take you out for coffee. I'll make it up to you properly. I hesitated. Normally, I'd decline. My friends were already waiting, but there was something magnetic about him. The kind of aura that makes you ignore the warning bells ringing in your head. We ended up at a small cafe around the corner. Dim lights, warm smells of roasted beans, cinnamon, and vanilla. Conversation flowed easily. Too easily, maybe. He asked about my family, my job, my hobbies. He laughed at all the right things, smiled at all the right moments. By the time we parted that evening, I felt like I had known him for months. Over the next 2 weeks, Eric was everywhere. He'd send texts just to say good morning, late-night calls asking about my day. He took me to expensive restaurants, bought thoughtful gifts, a small bracelet, a book by my favorite author. Everything was calculated, but it felt natural. I told my best friend, I think he's perfect. Looking back now, I realize that's exactly what he wanted me to think. The first hint of something off came almost innocuously. Eric asked me to share pictures, just casual selfies, nothing risque at first. I just want to see your smile, he said. I laughed, dismissing the small alarm bells in my chest. It didn't feel threatening yet, not at all. Then came the texts that weren't playful. You didn't answer my last text, are you mad at me? They read. Then, I saw you were online. Why didn't you reply? I felt my stomach twist. Eric seemed to expect my constant attention. The real shock came one night, 2 weeks in. We were sitting on my couch, a movie playing quietly in the background, when he leaned closer and said casually, I need to show you something. I smiled, expecting maybe a photo on his phone or a funny meme. But the screen he handed me showed screenshots of intimate messages and photos I had sent him. And then he smiled. A smile I should have recognized as a threat. You wouldn't want your family to see these, would you? His voice was soft, almost affectionate, but my stomach dropped. All you need to do is send me what I want. A little money. Easy. I froze. My mind spun. Was this a joke? A test? But the next message was more specific. He had listed my relatives' names, their Facebook accounts, everything. He had been watching me from the very beginning. I remember shaking, my hands trembling, my chest tightening like someone was squeezing it. I wanted to scream, to push him away, but my body refused to move. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning of a calculated plan to control, humiliate, and extort. Over the next few weeks, my life turned into a blur of fear and paranoia. I stopped answering my phone. I didn't open messages from unknown numbers. I avoided social media. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar car passing my house made my heart race. I confided in my sister Emma one rainy night. "He's blackmailing me," I whispered, voice breaking. She held me close, silent at first, then said, "We're going to get through this. We'll go to the police." Going to the police was terrifying. I had built Eric up in my mind as someone untouchable, someone who could ruin me with a single click. But the officers were professional, methodical. They confirmed he had done this to several women before me. That knowledge was both horrifying and relieving. I wasn't imagining things, and I wasn't alone. Eric, predictably, denied everything when confronted. But the evidence was damning. Screenshots, messages, traces of spyware on my devices. I remember reading the police report, trying to memorize every detail so I could understand how a person could be so cold, so manipulative. I slept with the lights on for months. Every creak in the house, every buzz of my phone made my body tense like a taut wire. My friends tried to reassure me, but nothing could erase the feeling that my privacy had been stolen, that the intimacy I had shared in trust had been weaponized. I felt violated, humiliated, and angry. But slowly I realized that fear wasn't the only thing I could feel. I could also feel resolve. I could fight back. I could reclaim my life. The process of rebuilding wasn't quick. I changed phone numbers, emails, passwords, even some social media accounts. I moved apartments, got therapy, learned self-defense, and tried to remind myself that Eric's power over me ended the moment I chose to reclaim it. Therapy helped me confront my feelings, guilt, shame, embarrassment. I realized that what had happened wasn't my fault. I hadn't done anything to deserve it. Eric was the predator. I was his target. I also reconnected with friends, allowing them back into my life slowly. Each small step, meeting a friend for coffee, laughing at a movie, sharing a secret, felt like victory. I learned to trust cautiously, understanding that trust could be earned, but must never be blind. Months later, the police notified me that Eric had been arrested for blackmailing several women. The charges didn't erase the trauma, but they validated my experience and gave me a sense of closure. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe again. Looking back, I can see the signs now that I missed in real time. His charm, his attention, his insistence on access, all tactics of manipulation. I had fallen into a trap meticulously set by someone who understood how to exploit trust. But surviving taught me something crucial. Fear is temporary, but awareness and resilience last a lifetime. I've since become an advocate for online safety and privacy. I talk to friends, co-workers, even strangers about digital boundaries, about how to recognize manipulative behavior before it escalates. I don't want anyone else to feel the same terror I felt. It's hard to explain how betrayal feels when it comes from someone who seemed perfect. It's a unique kind of pain, one that leaves invisible scars. But it's also a lesson in strength. You realize how capable you are of surviving and thriving even after your sense of safety has been shattered. I also learned that true sophistication, generosity, or charm is never paired with control, threats, or fear. If it comes with pressure, secrecy, or manipulation, it's not love. It's danger. And danger is best faced with knowledge, support, and action. I don't carry fear like I used to. I carry vigilance, understanding, and a quiet strength that comes from surviving someone who tried to break me. And above all, I carry the lesson that being cautious, protective of your privacy, and aware of red flags isn't paranoia. It's self-respect. Predators often hide behind charm and attention, exploiting trust to control and manipulate. Protect your personal boundaries, be wary of sudden intimacy, and never allow fear to silence you. True safety comes from vigilance, support, and the courage to reclaim your life when it's threatened. I never considered myself unlucky in love, or unlucky in life for that matter. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew your middle name and your dog's name too. My parents were the steady type, the ones who believed hard work, a solid career, and common sense could solve most problems. I followed the plan. College, a decent job, a few hobbies, and a small but loyal circle of friends. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't extraordinary, but I was content. That is, until Claire entered the picture. It started innocuously enough, swiping through an app on a lazy Tuesday night. Her profile picture stopped me cold, sun-drenched hair, a smile that seemed to know every secret of the world, eyes that didn't just look at you, they measured you, weighed you, maybe even judged you. I felt an odd combination of awe and nervousness. Her bio was light, flirty, adventurous. "Let's chase sunsets and bad decisions," it read. We matched almost immediately. I couldn't believe it. She messaged first. "Hey stranger, you seem safe, but I bet you've got a secret wild side." I stared at my phone, heart pounding, and typed back something witty, something clever, that I'd later forget as soon as the words left my fingertips. She responded quickly, and just like that, we were talking every night. Our first date was at a little rooftop cafe downtown. She was even more magnetic in person. Every laugh, every tilt of her head made me feel like I was falling through something I shouldn't be. Something dangerous, maybe, but intoxicating. We talked about music, travel, college days, the mundane trivia of life. And I laughed more than I had in weeks. The second date was dinner at a small Italian place. I arrived early and found a table near the window, hoping to look casual and confident. She came in, sun hat tipped just enough to hide her sunglasses, and I swear the room felt warmer. We ordered, we talked, and I was convinced this was the start of something real. By the end of the night, she kissed me on the cheek, and I went home floating, convinced she liked me. Then came the third date. "Hey Tyler," she said, voice casual. "My friends are throwing a little party tonight, you should come." I didn't question it. I wanted to believe. I dressed carefully, picked a shirt I knew looked good in dim lighting, and arrived at the address she texted. The door swung open, music pulsing from inside, laughter spilling onto the sidewalk. I hesitated, but Claire waved me in with that same magnetic grin. I should have left then. I should have trusted the tiny nagging voice at the back of my mind that whispered, "This doesn't feel right." But I didn't. Inside, I realized quickly it wasn't a party at all. It was a setup. A group of her friends circled me, phones pointed like cameras, grinning, laughing. She whispered into someone's ear, then turned to me, her grin now sharper, more predatory. "Surprise," she said. "Hope you like being famous for a minute." It hit me slowly, like cold water. This wasn't a joke we shared. This was about me. Me believing she was interested. Me thinking I had a chance. They filmed me floundering, laughing at me as I tried to play it off. I left humiliated, cheeks burning, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Weeks passed, and I tried to convince myself it was over. Just a prank. Just a cruel joke. But the strange part? It wasn't over. At first it was small things. A shadow lingering outside the gym, a flicker of recognition in the corner of my eye. Then I started seeing her near my work, always watching, always smirking as if she knew some secret I didn't. I told myself I was imagining it. I'm being paranoid. I'm letting the memory of that night warp reality. But the feeling didn't go away. "Tyler," I said one morning, meeting a friend for coffee. "You ever feel like someone's following you?" They laughed. "Relax, man. Maybe you're just stressed." But I wasn't stressed. I was tense. Every time I left the apartment, I scanned the street, calculated escape routes, checked reflections in windows. I stopped trusting the ordinary rhythms of life, the guy jogging past me, the mail carrier, even friends who asked innocuous questions. I stopped dating. I stopped staying out late. I started driving home the long way just to avoid streets I thought she might be on. I even avoided the gym I loved, telling myself it was just a precaution. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just precaution anymore. It was fear. One night, I was leaving a convenience store when I saw her. Claire. Across the street, leaning against a lamppost, phone in hand, watching me. The street lights glinted off her hair and she smiled that same smug smile, and I froze. My chest tightened, breath shallow. She didn't wave. She didn't yell. She just stood there like a predator waiting for the right moment. By now, my world had shrunk. I stopped going out with friends, canceled lunch plans, avoided family gatherings. The paranoia was relentless. Every beep of my phone, every knock at the door, every stranger on the street was a trigger. I tried to rationalize. She can't control my life. I'm imagining things. But the moments kept stacking up. Claire appeared at the coffee shop I frequented, at the corner where I caught the bus. Even in places I thought were private, she was there, or at least I felt her there. It wasn't just paranoia, it was psychological warfare. The prank had mutated. It was no longer about laughter, it was about power. She had me in a loop and I didn't know how to break it. I tried talking to friends about it, but they shrugged. Maybe you should block her online. I had. I deleted her number, I changed my routines. Nothing helped. The isolation was worst at night. Lying in bed, my mind replayed every encounter, every smirk, every laugh. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't trust anyone. Even when I felt safe in my apartment, I imagined her lurking just beyond the window, recording me, waiting. One Friday, I decided enough was enough. I couldn't live like this, always looking over my shoulder. I drove to the address I had from the third date disaster. It was an upscale apartment building, one I had walked past 100 times but never thought I'd see again. I climbed the stairs, heart hammering, and knocked on her door. When she answered, I was surprised, not by her beauty, not by her grin, but by how calm she looked. "Tyler," she said, as if we were meeting for coffee. "What a surprise." I blurted out everything: the gym, work, the coffee shop, the bus, the sleep I'd lost. She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with amusement. "I thought it was funny," she said lightly. "You took it so seriously." Her words hit me like ice. Funny? Funny to humiliate someone for weeks? Funny to stalk them? I realized then that she had no intention of stopping until she'd broken me completely. I left without saying another word, but something inside shifted. Fear was no longer enough to control me. Anger took its place, sharp and burning. I would reclaim my life, one step at a time. It wasn't easy. I changed jobs, moved apartments, and invested in therapy. I joined new social circles, built routines that were my own, and gradually, the paranoia receded. Claire didn't vanish from my memory overnight, but she became a reference point, not a shadow. I also realized I had underestimated myself. I had let fear dictate my life because I wanted validation from someone who didn't respect me. I had let someone else's amusement dictate my emotions, my choices, my peace. Eventually, I learned to walk without scanning the streets, to go to the gym without hesitation, to leave my apartment without fear. And in that process, I discovered something important. Safety isn't just about locks, security cameras, or distance. Safety is about self-respect and boundaries. I haven't seen Claire since that day. Maybe she moved on to someone else, another story, another victim. I don't care. What matters is that I moved on too. I learned that kindness and openness are precious, but so is the ability to protect yourself from cruelty. True strength isn't about avoiding pain. It's about reclaiming your life after it's been threatened. Boundaries, self-respect, and the courage to step away from toxicity are the most important tools we can cultivate in relationships and in life. Trust must be earned, not assumed, and your peace of mind is worth protecting above all else. People always assume danger announces itself loudly. Footsteps behind you in a dark parking lot, a raised voice, a slammed door. But the kind of danger I met crept in softly, disguised as comfort. I was 32, living in a modest apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina. My life was quiet. Work at the publishing office during the day, Netflix at night, the occasional weekend brunch with friends. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't really living either. The truth was, I'd been drifting since my father died 6 years earlier. He was the one person who made me feel grounded. Since then, I'd never quite found my footing. That's probably why I downloaded Soul Match. Loneliness is a sharp ache, and after watching 2 co-workers get engaged back to back, I figured I might as well try. My profile was plain, a picture from a hike, one at a friend's wedding, and a short bio about loving old books and iced lattes. That's how I matched with Daniel. His profile was simple, no shirtless selfies or flashy cars. Just him in a button-down shirt, warm smile, holding a coffee mug. He wrote, "Therapist, listener, I believe everyone deserves to be heard." From the first message, he felt different. No cheesy pickup lines, no pressure. Instead, he asked, "What was your childhood like?" I laughed at the screen. Jumping straight into the deep end? He replied, "I don't like shallow." Over the next week, our conversation stretched for hours. He didn't just ask about my favorite movies, he asked about my fears, my earliest memories, my dreams. And when I answered, his responses were calm, measured, like he was building a map of me. It felt safe. It felt like therapy. Except this time, he was also interested in me as a woman. His voice, when we finally talked on the phone, was soothing, deep but not intimidating. The kind of voice you want to trust. When he said, "I feel like I've known you forever," I believed him. The first time something unsettled me, it was subtle. We were talking about my father. I told Daniel how he used to build birdhouses in our backyard, humming old country songs while sanding the wood. I admitted how much I missed that sound. Daniel was quiet for a moment before saying, "Your father must have told you, measure twice, cut once." He sounds like that kind of man. I froze. That exact phrase, my father's phrase, wasn't in the story I told. It was something only he used to say, usually when I rushed through homework or tried to bake cookies without reading the recipe. I hadn't posted it online, hadn't shared it with anyone in years. "How did you know that?" I asked. Daniel chuckled softly. "It's just something dads say. A safe guess." I wanted to believe him. And maybe I would have, if it hadn't kept happening. Another night when I admitted I hated thunderstorms because they reminded me of a childhood house fire, he whispered, "You used to hide in the closet with a flashlight, didn't you?" I hadn't told him that part. Not to anyone. "You're freaking me out," I said, trying to make it sound like a joke. "I just get you," he replied. "That's rare, Emma. Most people never let themselves be seen. But you shine through every word." His flattery smoothed over my unease. But at night, lying in bed, I wondered how he knew so much about me. 2 months in, Daniel invited me to his apartment. He lived on the second floor of a brick complex near downtown. The place smelled faintly of coffee and cedar. At first glance, it was normal. Neat couch, bookshelves, a desk by the window. He poured me a glass of wine and we laughed about bad dates, about my coworker who microwaved fish in the office kitchen. But then I noticed the photos. They weren't framed on the walls, but scattered on a side table tucked into books stacked on his desk. Photos of me. Me at the grocery store with my hair in a messy bun. Me walking out of work, balancing coffee and folders. Me on the bus, staring at my phone, and one that made my stomach drop. Me at 16, standing in my old driveway, my father's arm draped around my shoulders. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Daniel, what is this?" He didn't flinch. He set down his wine, folded his hands, and smiled like a teacher waiting for a student to catch up. "I was wondering when you'd notice." My chest tightened. "These are years old. How do you even—" "Because I've always known you." His voice was calm, deliberate. "Long before Soul Match, before you swiped right, You just didn't recognize me. And then it clicked, slow and sickening. The voice, the way he probed my childhood, the phrases that echoed my father's. I had sat in a dim office 6 years ago, pouring my grief into a therapist's notebook. Daniel, except back then, his name wasn't Daniel. I stumbled back, my knees nearly buckling. You were my therapist. He nodded, almost proud. Yes, you were my favorite patient, so open, so raw. The board didn't understand. They said I crossed lines, but you and I, we've always been connected. My skin prickled with cold sweat. You lost your license for stalking. They called it stalking, he said, his voice tightening for the first time. I call it devotion. I never stopped thinking about you, Emma. You needed me, even if you didn't realize it. I looked at the door, calculating the steps. He noticed. Don't run, he said gently. I'd never hurt you. Everything I've done is because I care. I've watched you struggle, bury yourself in loneliness. I'm the only one who really knows you. I forced myself to speak, though my throat was dry. Knowing me doesn't mean owning me. His smile faltered. That's not what this is. You're twisting it. Am I? My voice cracked, but I pushed through. You lied. You hid. You watched me for years without my consent. That's not love. That's obsession. The room was silent, heavy. Then he whispered, You'll understand. In time. I didn't wait for time. That night I pretended calm. I sipped my wine, forced a smile, and said, Maybe you're right. Maybe I just need to sit with it. He relaxed, enough for me to excuse myself to the bathroom. I locked the door, pulled out my phone, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. When the knock came, soft, patient, I said loudly, Just a minute. Minutes later, red and blue lights flashed outside the window. Voices shouted. Daniel's calm mask cracked for the first time. Emma, what did you do? His voice wasn't soothing anymore. It was sharp, angry. I slipped past him as the officers pounded on the door. My legs carried me faster than my fear. Daniel was arrested that night. The photos, the surveillance, the years of obsession, they had evidence now. But the scars he left weren't physical. They were the kind you carry in silence, the kind that whisper every time you trust someone new. Love and therapy share a dangerous similarity. Both require trust. But trust is sacred. It cannot be demanded, manipulated, or stolen. Emma's story shows us that anyone who seeks control through knowing everything is not offering love or healing, but possession. Protect your boundaries, believe your instincts, and never confuse obsession with care. Real love honors freedom, not fear. I had always been cautious about dating apps. The idea of scrolling through endless faces, profiles polished to perfection, always felt shallow. Yet, after my last relationship ended badly, I found myself swiping one night while half watching a documentary on serial killers. A morbid contrast, I realize now. That's when I saw Lily. Her profile was simple. A few photos, soft lighting, her eyes looking down slightly, almost shy. Her bio said she loved books, quiet coffee shops, and walks by the river. She was warm, approachable, and something about the slight nervousness in her smile made me want to meet her. I swiped right. We matched instantly, and soon we were messaging back and forth. Her texts were slow, thoughtful, often apologizing if she didn't respond quickly. Sorry, I'm difficult sometimes, she would write. I laughed it off, thinking she just had social anxiety, and replied, Difficult is fine. Our first date was at a small local cafe. She was exactly like her profile, polite, soft-spoken, with a faint blush that came easily. We talked about books, movies, and small things like the shape of clouds or the music we loved. At the end of the night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while. Comfort. I walked her to her car and told myself I'd see her again. The second date was similar, although slightly more personal. We shared a slice of pizza and wandered along a quiet park path. She laughed nervously at her own jokes, and I found myself smiling constantly, caught in the ease of her company. By the third date, I thought I understood Lily, or so I believed. But that night changed everything. We were at a cozy bistro downtown, the kind with dim lighting and candles on each table. I ordered my usual. She chose something simple, a salad. We laughed about our favorite childhood cartoons, trading stories like we were old friends. Then, without warning, she snapped. "I can't believe you did that," she screamed, her voice cutting through the soft hum of the restaurant. Heads turned. I froze, unsure what she was referring to. "Why would you even—" She stopped abruptly, eyes wide, then blinked, took a deep breath, and continued in a soft, apologetic voice. "I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me." I was stunned. For a moment I thought I had misheard, maybe imagined it, but the intensity of her anger had been real, palpable. She smiled gently, trying to ease the tension, and I forced a laugh, nodding along as if nothing had happened. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more inconsistencies. Sometimes she was playful, teasing me about my fashion choices. Other times, she was bitter, criticizing everything I did with a harshness that didn't fit the woman I had met. One night, she became aggressive during a minor argument, throwing a glass across the room, only to sit quietly afterward, apologizing profusely like it had never happened. Each version of Lily swore she didn't remember the other. I began keeping a mental log, trying to reconcile the discrepancies. It was exhausting, confusing, and scary, but a part of me still wanted to believe in the warm, shy girl from the first date. It wasn't until I accidentally saw a folder peeking out of her bag that I realized something deeper was going on. I had stopped over one evening to drop off some paperwork and noticed a thick manila envelope labeled "Confidential, Patient Records" sticking out from her tote. I froze. Part of me wanted to leave it alone, but curiosity and fear propelled me forward. I glanced around, then carefully pulled it out. The documents inside revealed a life I hadn't imagined. She wasn't just shy or anxious. She was part of a court-ordered psychiatric program, living under a false identity. The records detailed a brutal crime, her involvement, and a treatment plan that included intense therapy and identity monitoring. My hands shook. I reread the pages, the lines blurring as the reality sank in. The dating profile was one of many masks. Each date, each mood shift, each conflicting personality was part of a fractured reality I had unknowingly stepped into. I confronted her carefully. "Lily, or whatever your real name is, what is all this?" I asked, trying to remain calm. Her expression shifted, a mix of fear, shame, and confusion. She didn't answer, only looked down, trembling. It was the first time I truly realized I might not know her at all. After discovering the documents, our relationship changed completely. I tried to maintain boundaries, to understand without judging, but it was impossible. Some nights she would be tender, apologizing for every harsh word or violent outburst. Other nights she would be unrecognizable, bitter, cold, or even hostile. I started researching dissociative disorders, psychiatric programs, and the legal consequences for individuals like her. I wanted to understand her world, the program, the court order, the therapy she had undergone. But the more I read, the clearer it became. I wasn't equipped to handle this alone. I suggested therapy for couples, or even individual therapy, but she refused. Not out of malice, but confusion, fear, and memory gaps. I began to realize that any normal relationship was impossible. Loving her meant acknowledging that parts of her existence were controlled by systems, memories, and trauma beyond her own control. One night, after a particularly tense argument where she had switched personalities mid-conversation, I finally said, "I can't keep doing this. I care about you, but I can't love someone I don't know." She didn't argue. She simply cried, the different fragments of her pain visible in her expressions. Breaking up with her was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Part of me still missed the shy, warm, apologetic Lily from the first date. But reality had forced me to accept the truth. She wasn't a person I could love in a traditional sense. Loving her required navigating psychiatric complexities I wasn't trained to manage, and it wasn't fair to either of us. Afterward, I reflected on everything that had happened. The deception wasn't malicious in the way most people assume. It was survival. A woman fractured by trauma, trying to exist within legal boundaries, hiding behind layers of carefully constructed identities. And yet, it taught me something about human complexity, empathy, and boundaries. I now understand the importance of observing patterns, respecting personal safety, and recognizing when circumstances are beyond one's ability to help. Sometimes, the kindest action is stepping back, not out of judgment but self-preservation and understanding. I still think of Lily occasionally, wondering which fragments of her had found peace, which had struggled, and whether she was finally able to reconcile the conflicting selves within her. But I've learned that some relationships exist only as lessons, and mine taught me more about boundaries, empathy, and caution than any ordinary romance ever could. I've always been careful when it comes to dating. Not overly cautious, but cautious enough to avoid mistakes. Public spaces, group outings, no private addresses shared too soon. My friends joked that I was paranoid, but I called it prudent. After all, the stories were everywhere. People pretending to be someone they weren't, relationships that started online and ended in fear. I wasn't about to be a statistic. Still, when Daniel's profile popped up, I swiped right almost absent-mindedly. He had a casual, friendly smile in every photo, and his bio was thoughtful without being over the top. Loves coffee, weekend hikes, dogs, and bad sci-fi movies, it read. My thumb hovered over the swipe button for a second longer than usual, then tapped. I expected the usual small talk. Instead, his first message was oddly specific. Hey, Olivia. I think we've probably crossed paths at Bluebird Coffee. You're always in the corner by the window around 7:30 a.m., right? I froze. That's oddly specific. I texted back cautiously. Maybe. I go there sometimes. Cool. I'm usually there on Tuesdays. Maybe we've said hi without realizing it. I brushed it off. Maybe he was observant. Maybe it really was coincidence, but then he added, also, I noticed you lift at Iron Peak Gym. We must have bumped elbows on the leg press a few times. I swallowed. This was too much, too soon. But there was something charming about his tone, something that made me want to believe it was harmless. We agreed to meet at Bluebird Coffee the next weekend. I made a rule. If anything felt off, I would leave immediately. The first date was pleasant. We talked about our favorite books, travel spots, and childhood pets. We laughed over the awkwardness of online dating, and I felt myself relaxing. That night, I thought maybe this was just normal. Maybe Daniel was just friendly, observant, and sincere. I didn't realize just how wrong I was. I noticed it first when he mentioned my childhood dog. Wasn't your dog a golden retriever? Buddy, right? I remember you saying how he'd chase the squirrels out back when you were little. My stomach dropped. How could he know that? I had never shared it online, never mentioned it in casual conversation with strangers. Yeah. How did you know that? I asked, voice tighter than I intended. He shrugged, smiling as if it were a simple coincidence. Lucky guess? Or maybe your profile had hints I just noticed. I forced myself to laugh it off, but the unease didn't leave. By the end of the date, I felt a weight in my chest. He seemed too informed, too in sync with my life. Later that night, walking home, I felt a strange sense of being watched. I brushed it off as paranoia until I caught a figure in a storefront reflection. Him, trailing at a distance, just far enough to be hidden if I turned abruptly. Daniel? I called, half expecting it to be coincidence. He stepped out from behind a lamppost, hands raised innocuously. Hey, I didn't mean to scare you. My heart hammered. Why are you following me? I just wanted to make sure you got home safe, he said, voice calm, smiling as if it were reasonable. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, his movements, trying to rationalize, trying to tell myself it was all harmless. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The next few weeks were a blur of texts, small gestures, and escalating fear. He always seemed to know where I'd be, my favorite cafe, the grocery store, even the times I ran errands. I started checking over my shoulder constantly, glancing at reflections in windows, noticing shadows that moved too deliberately. I tried confronting him once. "Daniel, I think you're crossing a line," I said after a morning coffee. We sat across from each other, the steam from our drinks curling between us. Crossing a line? His smile was slow, deliberate, unnerving. "Olivia, I've known about you for months. I've watched, I've noticed. I wanted to meet you, not just online, but in real life." I froze. The polite, harmless facade crumbled. I could see the obsession beneath, the careful planning, the deliberate watching. "You followed me," I whispered, voice trembling. He nodded. "I created a profile just to get close to you. I saw you at the gym, in the park, at the cafe. I wanted to be the one you'd notice." I felt cold, trapped, 1,000 alarms ringing in my head. Every smile, every joke, every seemingly innocent observation now had a sinister edge. I walked home that day in a daze, shaking, my mind racing with the possibilities of what he could do, what he already knew. My safe routines felt violated, every street a potential stage for him to appear. I knew I couldn't live like this. Fear was not a way to exist, yet it had become my constant companion. I blocked him online, changed my gym schedule, and altered my daily routine. I documented every encounter, every text, every suspicious moment. I confided in a coworker I trusted. "I think he's obsessed," I admitted quietly, showing screenshots and timestamps. "Olivia, this is serious. You need to tell someone, police, security, whoever," she said, concern etched in her face. I made the call. Reporting stalking wasn't as simple as it sounded. The officer took my statements, gave me advice about restraining orders, but explained that without a direct threat, action was limited. Still, it was a start. I also strengthened my personal safety. Self-defense classes, GPS tracking on my phone, new locks. Every precaution helped me regain a sense of control. Slowly, fear turned into preparation, helplessness into empowerment. Months passed. I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood. I rejoined my favorite classes at the gym, made friends, and allowed myself small moments of peace. Daniel disappeared from my life, but the memory lingered. It haunted me at first, the way he watched, the way he studied, the way he made me feel unsafe in my own routines. But I learned something crucial. Fear loses power when you reclaim your life. I wasn't defined by his obsession. I was defined by my resilience. I rebuilt boundaries, strengthened intuition, and trusted myself to recognize danger early. I started dating again, cautiously, but without the same blind optimism. I approached relationships with awareness, understanding that attraction and interest must come with respect, safety, and mutual consent. The experience left scars, yes, but it also left lessons, vigilance, self-respect, and the courage to act when someone violates your boundaries. I would never forget Daniel, but I would also never let him dictate my life again. Obsession disguised as affection is dangerous. True connection comes from respect, transparency, and mutual consent. Protecting your boundaries and trusting your instincts is essential. Your safety and peace of mind are always worth more than validation from anyone else. Breakups leave strange scars. Some are obvious, like the awkward silence when friends ask how you're doing, or the empty space on the dresser where her perfume bottles used to sit. Others are quieter, hidden in the rhythm of your days. the way you skip certain songs on the radio or avoid restaurants that hold too many memories. For me, it was all of the above. I'd been with Rachel for 3 years. We lived together for one, planned trips we never took, and had the kind of arguments that felt rehearsed by the end. When it finally collapsed, it wasn't explosive. It was a slow fade. Unanswered texts, forced laughter, and then her standing in the doorway with her arms crossed saying, "Jason, I just don't think this is working anymore." I told myself I'd be fine. I buried myself in work at the marketing firm, played basketball with my buddies twice a week, and cooked the same stir-fry dinner until it became muscle memory. But nights were the hardest. That's when I'd lie awake replaying every mistake, every word I wished I could take back. 3 months later, my friend Derek shoved his phone across the bar and said, "Dude, it's time. Download one of these. Tinder, Bumble, whatever. You've been single too long." "I'm not ready," I muttered, sipping my beer. "You'll never be ready. Just swipe a little, see what happens." That night, half buzzed and lonely, I caved. I downloaded Spark, a dating app with clean profiles and endless faces. I promised myself I wouldn't take it seriously, just scrolling, just browsing, nothing heavy. Then I saw her, Emily. Her bio read, "Sarcasm is my love language. If you don't laugh at dark jokes, keep scrolling." She wore ripped jeans, a leather jacket, and a grin that looked halfway to mischief. Something about her felt alive, the exact opposite of the hollow I'd been carrying. I swiped right. So did she. Our first conversation started with her roasting my profile picture. "You really thought posing with that fish was attractive?" she texted. "It's called proving I can provide," I shot back. She replied with a laughing emoji and a gif of a caveman holding a spear. From that moment, it was easy. Emily wasn't polished or cautious like most of the people I'd met online. She was blunt, fast-witted, and fearless in conversation. She asked about my worst childhood haircut, my cringiest teenage phase, the dumbest fight I'd ever had with a friend, and she answered with stories of her own, never holding back. When we met in person, she showed up late, unapologetic, with eyeliner smudged from laughing too hard at some joke she told herself in the car. We grabbed tacos and cheap beer, and within minutes, she had the whole bar laughing, bartender included. For weeks, I felt lighter than I had in years. We went bowling and made fun of each other's gutter balls. We spent hours in diners, splitting fries and telling stories until the waitstaff had to kick us out. She had this energy, this magnetic pull that made the world feel less heavy. I told Derek, and she's not like Rachel, she's fun. No games. He smirked. "Finally, you deserve a win." I thought I'd found one. It was a Friday night when I decided to bring Emily around my friends. We met at a brewery downtown. Me, Derek, my buddy Nate, a few others. Emily showed up in a red flannel shirt, hair pulled back, cracking jokes within minutes. She fit right in. But halfway through the night, I caught Derek's expression shift. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Dude, you didn't tell me she was Rachel's roommate." I blinked. "What?" He jerked his chin toward Emily. "Rachel's old roommate, the one with the loud laugh. She was at your Christmas party 2 years ago." My stomach sank. I studied Emily across the table, how her smile lingered a second too long, like she was waiting for this moment. Later, when we were alone outside, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me you knew Rachel?" Her grin turned sly. "Because it was funnier this way." "Funnier?" My chest tightened. She shrugged. "Rachel told me all about how you treated her, how selfish you were. I thought, why not see for myself? Swipe right, go on a few dates, maybe get a little payback." I stared at her, trying to process. "So, all of this was a joke to you?" "Not a joke. A prank." She tilted her head, studying me like I was a science experiment. "And honestly, you were easier to fool than I expected." Something inside me cracked. All the laughter, the late nights, the hope, it wasn't real. It was bait. If it had ended there, I might have healed. Embarrassed, sure. Angry, definitely. But I could have walked away. Emily didn't let me. It started with whispers in my friend group. Derek told me she was saying I'd let her on, that I was messaging other women behind her back. I laughed it off at first, until screenshots surfaced online. Fake screenshots. They looked real enough. My name, my profile picture, conversations where I supposedly flirted with half a dozen women at once. Some were vulgar, others just pathetic. And people believed them. She posted them on forums, on social media, tagging my job, tagging people I knew. She wrote captions like, "Ladies, watch out for Jason, classic cheater, don't fall for his act." At first I thought no one would take it seriously, but the internet doesn't ask for proof, it just spreads. Within days, coworkers looked at me differently. My boss called me into his office, his voice stiff. "Jason, we can't have this kind of reputation tied to the company. Clients are already asking questions." I tried to explain. I showed him my actual phone, my real conversations, but the damage was done. A week later, I was let go. Everywhere I turned, there was another post, another rumor. Some women messaged me directly, calling me trash, liar, manipulator. Friends distanced themselves, unsure of what to believe. It felt like drowning in lies I didn't create. By the time the dust settled, I wasn't the same person. I wasn't Jason, the guy who liked Sunday basketball games and late-night diner runs. I was Jason, the cheater, the liar, the joke. I thought about suing, about pressing charges, but lawyers told me the screenshots were gray area. Harassment cases online rarely stuck unless there were threats. And Emily was careful. She never threatened me. She just destroyed me. I stopped going out. I deleted social media. I moved apartments when someone left a note on my car windshield that said, "Cheaters don't change." But in the quiet, something shifted. I realized I'd spent months waiting for someone else to clear my name, to hand me back the life I lost. That wasn't going to happen. So I started small. Rebuilt. Reached out to the friends who still believed me. Got freelance work while searching for a new job. I told my story when people asked, no longer with shame, but with blunt honesty. Yeah, I was set up. She lied. She spread things that weren't true. It ruined a lot, but I'm still here. The scar is permanent, but scars are proof of survival. Jason's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the fragility of trust in a world where reputation can be destroyed with a screenshot. Not every smile hides good intentions. Not every match is what it seems, and the internet can turn lies into fire faster than truth can catch up. Protect your name, your boundaries, and your circle of trust. Because once your reputation is stolen, rebuilding it takes strength you never thought you'd need. Moving to a new city is supposed to be exciting. The unknown streets, the promise of new opportunities, the thrill of anonymity. I thought I was prepared. After college, I landed a decent job in marketing and found a small one-bedroom apartment in a modest building downtown. The neighborhood was quiet, mostly young professionals and a handful of retirees, with a few coffee shops tucked between brick storefronts. I unpacked boxes, hung up pictures, and even managed to assemble the IKEA shelves without swearing too much. Life felt good. I liked my solitude, the gentle rhythm of being responsible for just myself, and the small routines I was building. But after a few weeks, I felt that itch. Loneliness disguised as curiosity about companionship. One night, a friend convinced me to try a dating app. I had never been particularly good at meeting people, and online dating seemed like the most practical approach in a city I didn't know. I swiped, half-heartedly scrolling when I saw her. Lila. Her photos were simple, candid, a laugh caught mid-smile, sunlight in her hair, nothing flashy. Her profile said she loved hiking, indie music, and trying out new restaurants. She was sweet, almost shy, but had this subtle confidence that drew me in. We matched, and soon we were messaging constantly. She asked thoughtful questions, not just surface-level stuff, but things like, "Do you prefer mornings or nights?" And "What's your favorite place in your apartment?" I laughed at the last one. "Why my apartment?" "That's personal," I wrote. She replied almost immediately, Joking. Curiosity, I guess. I like knowing the spaces people live in. I thought it was cute, a little quirky. Our first date was a casual coffee. Conversation flowed easily. She was warm, attentive, and genuine, or so I thought. By the second date, she had me at a small tapas restaurant, laughing at her nervous jokes and half-embarrassed smiles. There was nothing alarming, just connection. But small things started adding up. She asked where I kept my spare keys, if my door locks were simple, and whether I lived alone. At the time, I brushed it off. People are curious when they like someone, right? For the first few weeks, everything was normal. We went on dates, shared takeout, and texted constantly. But Lila's questions were persistent, subtle, unnerving once I started noticing patterns. She wanted to know my schedule, when I left for work, when I returned, how often I had friends over. I laughed it off the first time. "Wow, you're really invested," I said during a lunch date. She blushed and shrugged, saying, "I just like to feel connected, I guess." I smiled, thinking it was affection, not control. Then, odd things began happening. One morning I came home to find my apartment slightly ajar. I swore I had locked it. My heart raced, but nothing appeared stolen. My wallet, electronics, everything intact. But drawers were slightly open, cushions out of place. I told myself I had imagined it, maybe left the door ajar in a rush. Later I noticed small inconsistencies. My hoodie draped differently, books shifted slightly on the shelf. I chalked it up to fatigue, moving boxes, or forgetfulness. Lila started asking if I liked keeping things tidy, joking about being a little obsessive. Her comments now made me feel strange, but I still dismissed them. Then came the night that changed everything. I got home late from work. The streetlights outside flickered and I noticed my apartment door slightly open again. I froze. Adrenaline spiked. I nudged it with my foot, slowly stepping inside. Everything was subtly rearranged. My laptop was on the counter, drawers slightly shifted, and a faint smell of perfume lingered. I called out softly, "Hello? Is someone here?" No answer. My pulse thundered. I started walking toward the bedroom, hearing faint shuffling. At first I thought it was my imagination, but then I heard a soft footstep from the closet. My throat went dry. Slowly, I moved closer and yanked the closet door open. Lila stood there, clutching my spare hoodie, eyes wide, almost guilty. I can't explain," she whispered. I stumbled backward, heart racing. "Explain? Why are you in my closet?" She swallowed, tears forming. "I followed you after our first date. I wanted to see where you lived. I didn't mean to scare you. I've been watching sometimes. I like knowing you're safe." I stared at her in disbelief. My mind raced, trying to process her words. "You've been breaking into my apartment?" "Yes," she admitted softly. "But I never touched anything important. I wanted to be near you. I wanted to scream, to call the police, to throw her out. But shock had frozen me. I couldn't move. The woman I trusted, the person I had laughed with, smiled at, held hands with, had been living like a shadow in my home. I spent that night pacing, barely sleeping. By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it. I called Lila. She answered hesitantly, her voice soft. "We need to talk," I said firmly, trying to maintain composure. She agreed to meet at a cafe. Sitting across from her, I watched as her nervous hands twisted the napkin in front of her. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you do this?" She hesitated, eyes downcast. I thought I was helping. I know it sounds insane. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I didn't want anyone else to hurt you. I didn't know how to... I don't know. I felt a mixture of anger, fear, and pity. "Lila, this isn't love. This is obsession. This is stalking. You've invaded my privacy, my safety. I trusted you, and you broke that trust." Her lips quivered. "I didn't hurt you," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." "It doesn't matter what you meant," I said, voice shaking. "The fact is, you broke boundaries. You've been living like a shadow in my life without my consent. That's not love. That's dangerous." She nodded silently, finally understanding the severity. I ended the conversation there, realizing this relationship was over. There was no coming back from this. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and took time off work to decompress. The paranoia lingered for weeks. Every creak, every unfamiliar noise made my body tense. Therapy helped me process the fear, anger, and betrayal. I learned to rebuild my sense of safety and trust, starting with small steps, locking doors, keeping windows secured, and understanding that vigilance is part of personal security. I also reflected on my relationship with Lila. I realized how easily charm, warmth, and attentiveness can mask dangerous intentions. Trust should be given carefully, and boundaries should never be compromised, even for someone you care about. Over time, I reconnected with friends, focusing on social bonds that felt secure and transparent. I began journaling, writing down experiences and lessons to understand patterns of behavior I hadn't recognized. Most importantly, I accepted that fear doesn't make you weak. It teaches awareness. Years later, I can think about Lila without panic, though the memory still triggers unease. It's a reminder that even in what feels safe, danger can lurk, and that trusting your instincts and protecting your personal space is paramount. I've never considered myself unlucky when it comes to dating apps. I'm cautious, sure, but not paranoid. I always met in public, kept my personal details private, and never agreed to late-night meetups with strangers. I thought that was enough to stay safe. Apparently, it wasn't. It started with Haley's profile. Bright smile, a casual pose on a beach boardwalk, hair curling perfectly in the breeze. Her bio was short and sweet: coffee, dogs, and road trips. She messaged first, and we fell into an easy rhythm of texting, light, fun, teasing. Over the next few weeks, we shared stories about work, favorite hangouts, and the small details of our lives. I started to think she was someone I could actually connect with. Then came the date. She offered to pick me up. "I live just a few minutes from you," she said. Her tone was casual, friendly. I hesitated for a moment, but the thought of skipping the ride and coordinating a meeting in public seemed unnecessary. I wanted to believe this was normal dating. The morning of the date, I was careful. Wallet in the front pocket, phone fully charged, car keys in my hand. Haley pulled up in a clean black sedan, windows tinted just enough to obscure her features. She smiled when she saw me. "Hey Marcus, ready for lunch?" she asked. "Yeah, definitely," I said, trying to mask the nervousness I always feel before a first in-person date. The first few minutes of the drive felt normal. We made small talk about work, the weather, and the terrible traffic downtown. But then I noticed something. The car wasn't heading toward the restaurant. Instead of turning onto Main Street, Haley made a right, then a left, taking us down quiet, empty roads I didn't recognize. "Hey," I said cautiously, "is this the way to the restaurant?" Haley laughed, a light casual sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Shortcut. Trust me, it's faster this way." I nodded, forcing myself to relax. Maybe she was right. But my gut tightened, a subtle alarm I chose to ignore at first. The further we drove, the more isolated the roads became. Tall trees blocked the sunlight and small abandoned houses lined the street. The air felt heavier, oppressive. I started to pay attention to the mirrors and the windows. Empty streets, no traffic, no one else around. Haley," I started, trying to keep my voice casual. "These roads, are we still heading to the restaurant?" She smiled again. "Yep, just a few more minutes." I didn't believe her. Every instinct in my body screamed that something was off. I tried to remind myself that maybe she knew a secret route. Maybe this was still normal. Then she made a turn into an abandoned lot. Gravel crunched under the tires as we stopped. I saw shadows moving in the dim light. Several men emerged from the darkness, their faces partially obscured, bodies tense and deliberate. "Haley," my voice cracked. She laughed, a hollow, unnatural sound. "Surprise. Don't worry, it's fine. Just hang out for a second." Panic gripped me. My stomach dropped, my heart pounding as adrenaline surged. Something in her tone, the lack of warmth, the sharpness beneath the casual laugh, shattered any remaining illusions. I had only seconds to react. I opened my door without thinking. Gravel sprayed as my feet hit the ground. "Wait, don't," Haley shouted, but I didn't stop. My hands were shaking, my breath ragged as I ran. I heard footsteps behind me, gravel crunching in sync with mine. I sprinted toward the tree line at the edge of the lot, leaping over fallen branches and rocks. The men shouted something behind me, voices distorted by distance, but I didn't stop to listen. My only focus was getting out alive. I darted onto a side street and looked for a safe place. A house with lights on, a car parked outside. I ran up the driveway and pounded on the door. A man answered, blinking in confusion. "Please, call the police," I gasped, chest heaving. There's a group trying to..." He didn't need more explanation. Within minutes, I was sitting in a patrol car, wrapped in a blanket, telling officers everything I could remember. The roads, the car, the shadows, Haley. Later, when I checked the dating app, her profile was gone. Not deactivated, gone, as if it had never existed. A sinking realization hit me. This wasn't a date. It was a setup, a robbery, maybe worse. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. Every car on a quiet street made my stomach twist. I kept replaying the look in her eyes, the casual cruelty of it. I went back to the app, tried to see if there were similar reports. Others had been flagged, warnings of fake profiles and predatory setups. I realized I wasn't alone, but it didn't make me feel any safer. Friends and family were supportive, but there was only so much they could do. I filed a police report, but they reminded me that unless someone was caught in the act, it would be difficult to pursue. I changed routines, avoided dating apps, and became hyper-aware of every interaction with strangers. I realized how naive I had been. Trust, I learned, must be earned, not assumed. A smile, a friendly text, a charming voice, none of it guaranteed safety. Months passed. I slowly reclaimed my life. I joined a self-defense class, changed my commuting routes, and rebuilt confidence in public spaces. I didn't return to dating apps immediately. Instead, I focused on small victories, walking home without looking over my shoulder, meeting friends for lunch without paranoia, trusting my instincts when something felt wrong. The memory of Haley remained, a warning etched into my awareness. But I refused to let fear define me. I had survived, and survival demanded more than hiding. It demanded learning, adapting, and regaining control. I also learned to listen to myself. Every instinct, every unease was a tool. It wasn't paranoia. It was self-preservation. I became vigilant, not suspicious, cautious, not fearful. I learned that boundaries matter, and personal safety is non-negotiable. Life slowly returned to normal, but I carried the lesson with me. Charm and smiles can mask danger. Appearances can deceive. And while we hope for connection, we must always safeguard ourselves first. Not everyone who seems kind or interested has good intentions. Trust is earned, safety is essential, and instincts are your first line of defense. Protect your boundaries and never underestimate the importance of caution, even in seemingly ordinary encounters.